We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Antry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. And we're keeping up with our theme of what we've watched this week. So I watched The Matrix Resurrections. And
I have not seen it. No spoilers.
Yeah, no spoilers at all. I wanted to like it. I loved the trailers. I thought, hey, this could be interesting. It feels like Lana Wachowski maybe has something to say, and I always like movies where the creator, came into it with something to say rather than it just being like, hey, we have a slot to fill at this time in our calendar and should stick a movie in there regardless.
Like The Mummy 4?
Yeah, that type of thing.
The fourth Mummy movie?
And so I unfortunately certainly cannot say that I loved it on first watch. I don't know. I don't feel clear-headed about it. I haven't watched it a second time yet. So, but I definitely was not like, oh, I love this. Yeah. Some good
My
parts,
wife and I
some
both
bad
agree
parts.
that movies are too long these days. We are both upset that
wasn't
I
the
don't think
problem.
movies need to be 90 minutes. I think
Sure.
that they need to be 120 or less.
Okay.
I think that movies that are over 2 hours need to have a point to being over 2 hours.
Right.
And right now, the point is that Zack Snyder doesn't have anybody to tell him not to do it anymore.
Yeah, he's not reining it in. Yeah,
he's done.
As far as
I
Matrix
saw-
Resurrections on a technical level, some of the cinematography choices were a little bit odd. I think they were going for kind of like neo-retro, which would fit in the whole, sort of feeling I think that they were going for. They were doing the thing where, I don't know if it's actually like overcranking or undercranking the camera, but it's where you like expose the camera at 12 frames per second instead of 24 so that you get like extreme motion blur, and I think they were doing like a digitally manipulated version of that, and that just looked kind of weird. It's a bit like animating on the twos, but with even more motion blur for it, and it looks old and not good. It's like there are better ways of getting that look, and I don't know. All of it looked a little bit strange, and some of it was for story reasons. But in any case, I wanted to love it a lot more than I did at first blush. That's my subjective take on The Matrix Resurrections. I don't know if I disliked it or not. I can't tell.
Doesn't sound like you loved it.
I did not love it. I did not.
So I saw the new Mortal Kombat movie.
Oh, okay, sure.
I had purchased it for $10 because it was on Blu-ray for $10. I was like, how it's $10.
Yeah.
Clearly it'll be fine.
That's less than a movie ticket if you had gone to see it.
Had I gone to see it, it'd have been less than a movie ticket, and certainly I had popcorn and everything with it. So,
Yeah.
That movie's a ginormous pile of garbage. It's so bad.
Pretty
so
good
bad.
opening. Pretty good opening, and then the rest is not good.
I just so very, very, very not good. Like even the fan service, you're like, you could the fan service more fatalities and everything,
Right.
where you're like, it's just they're over the top in the game, and which is fine when they're standalone and there's nothing else really going on, but just so like take you out of what's going on to have a weird. It was just really, really bad. I mean, the first Mortal Kombat movie, which I saw in the theaters and I didn't hate,
Right.
even though
It had its entertainment value.
White dude playing Raiden, because of course they did. Can't have anybody else.
French, no less. Yeah. When I think of the Thunder God Raiden, I think of a Frenchman.
Right, there can be only one. I'm like, come on, man, that guy's voice, like, it was fine for the Highlander, but he's never been in another movie where I thought, yeah, he's killing it. And certainly Mortal Kombat wasn't it. It was just, I was very disappointed.
Okay.
I thought it would be. The sound was good. They had, my subwoofers were going. So, but other than that, I cannot not recommend. Like $10, I felt I overpaid.
Okay.
By quite a bit.
Well, a couple of Warner Brothers movies that we did not give big thumbs up to. That's been.
I'm looking forward to the Matrix movies. So I mean, I think that no matter what happens with that Matrix movie, there's very little chance I'm going to be anything less than disappointed, because my expectations are far too high. Okay. And that same thing happens whenever I watch the second 2 Matrix movies, where I'm like, oh, this isn't as good as the first one. You know, I mean, they're fine and I like them, but you know, they're always a disappointment in comparison to the first one, which was, of course, you know, a masterpiece. AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. No, we didn't splice something there. I just decided not to do the ums and ahs that I do right before I usually do that. So get your question answered. Just ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Go to avrant.com, see our past episodes there, all 700 and however many of them that we have these days. We also have facebook.com/AVRant Podcast, youtube.com/AVRant, where you can see our mugs, handsome, chiseled, classically handsome mugs sitting in front of us.
Well, now people know we're liars.
Well, they only know if they actually go to the YouTube page
That's
and
right.
press play. Then they'll know. Though you can be rest assured if there's a thumbnail at the front of the video that has our faces on it, Rob has chosen the one that makes him look the best and me look the worst.
Oh, I'm not looking for that.
That's Rob's semi-passive aggressive way
Sure.
of getting back at me for all the needling I do. So it's fine. I'm not bitter at all. Let me see. If you want to contact us directly, Rob at avrant.com. His Twitter's at First Reflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter's at avrant_Tom. Which I think did I tweet this week or was it last week? I think I might have tweeted last week. I don't remember. Anyways, you believe me, you can follow me. You will not. You will always be pleasantly surprised that I said something that wasn't just an announcement.
Tom
of the
will
podcast.
not flood your timeline.
I am not going to slide up in those DMs. It's not a thing that's going to happen. I'm going to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week and support the podcast in some way, one of the ways you can do that is going to avrant.com, click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and that will send you to a PayPal donation site. So we want to thank Gregory and Jonathan for doing that week. Thank you very much, Greg and John.
Yes, Gregory and Jonathan, thank you both very much for the PayPal donations. Really appreciate the financial support.
We also want to thank our 135 patrons over at patreon.com. It's the beginning of the month, so we lost one. But hopefully we'll get that one back. Patreon.com/AVRant Podcast. It's a service. You can become a contributing listener to our podcast. Every month they'll take some money from you and give most of it to us. So thank you very much to our 135 patrons over at Patreon.
For sure, patreon.com/AVRant Podcast. If you'd like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation, big thanks to our 135 patrons.
So if you can't support us financially, we completely understand. But if you do something to support us, we will mention you here, but only usually if you tell us what you did. So, if you talked us up to somebody, or you bought something and told the manufacturer that, or if you got somebody else to listen to the podcast or something along those lines, just let us know what you did. So Kurt, this is not really an AVRant thing, but an AV Gadgets thing, which, of course, I am the editor-in-chief of AV Gadgets these days. Kurt says it's a tangent. Well, it is tangential to AVRant, but he helped point out the strange wording of Andrew's about the author section on AV Gadgets, which, I obviously had nothing to do with, as far as I'm concerned. I feel like I might have accidentally deleted something at some point when I was doing something. So I will take the hit for that one. I don't feel like that was Andrew's fault, but maybe it was.
I still got blamed as Grammar Rob for forwarding the email, but that was not me. It was all Kurt, and thank you to Kurt. He noticed.
Yes,
He's like,
thank you.
That's not English. Those
are
English words.
So that entire website got moved from one server to another. When it did, it broke a couple of things.
Okay.
Now we've since fixed everything for the most part, but it could have been the server migration. I don't know why it would have messed up just that text, but we can blame it on that.
Okay.
Alex also sent Alex, that's another listener of the week. Sent some photos with permission for me to use on AV Gadgets, which is great. I love having listener photos and using them often. I try to use them often. Alex also solved his near black flashing issue on his LG C8 OLED without having to resort to rolling back the firmware somehow. Just rebooting his Apple TV 4K cleared up the issue. Once again, have you tried turning it off and turning it back on?
No idea what that would have been, but I'm glad it was an easy fix, Alex, and thank you for giving Tom permission to use your photos on AV Gadgets. That's very nice.
I will tell you right now, it's HDMI. Okay, somehow HDMI is to blame for this. We also got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going during our global pandemic from Daryl, Sean, member of the 2 Hour Plus Club, Gurinder, providing a link to the Pepperig duster from IKEA.
I mean, it's IKEA, so much. So you know that the name is going to be something.
Pepperig. There's a lot of P's in this.
There are.
That he loves so much, and said that Tom might need to get. I did dust in here the other day, and it was far beyond a duster. I had to bring the vacuum cleaner in here. Let me see, Grinder. John, Mike, Jason, Alan, Jay, Greg, who's a member of the 2 Hour Plus Club, and Aras. So we got Daryl, Sean, Gurinder, John, Mike, Jason, Alan, Jay, Greg, and Aras. So thank you very much for thanking us.
You'll hear the names one more time from my lips. Daryl, Sean, Gurinder, John, Mike, Jason, Alan, Jay, Greg, and Aras. Thank you all very much for sending in those notes of gratitude and notes of encouragement. We definitely appreciate them. Big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions. Tom's sipping away on coffee multiple times there.
I am trying to catch up. So in the news, Sony has purchased Bungie, the game studio behind the original Halo trilogy and the current Destiny franchise, for $3.6 billion. Bungie was a Microsoft first-party studio back in 2000, but they split from Microsoft in 2007, and now they'd be part of Sony. This is not a response to Microsoft's recent announcement of buying Activision, and this deal between Sony and Bungie has been in the works for months. Just a coincidental timing, and Sony has said that Bungie will remain independent and multi-platform and sit alongside PlayStation Studios as opposed to being absorbed. Yeah, that's what they always say. That's what they always say until they absorb you and lay off most of your staff and take all of your assets.
Once again, I'm sure existing contracts with other platforms will be carried out. All the studios have been good about that. But yes, I wouldn't expect this to go on forever and ever. At some point, Bungie's titles will become Sony exclusive. But hey, turnabout is fair play, because that's as you can tell from the price of $68.7 billion versus $3.6 billion, Bungie is a much smaller studio than Activision. So, but yeah, I mean, this is kind of weird. We've got the giants just gobbling up studios
everything up.
I mean, not little independent studios that were struggling on their own or something like that. Big
not some
studios.
indie that made one good game, and they got bought by a bigger company, which then absorbed them and then took their talent and used it elsewhere. These people make good games. We're going to just throw all the money at them until they say yes.
It's like, what's that? Is Ubisoft going to get purchased? Is EA going to get purchased? Those are the two giants that are left. So, nutty times.
Sony has announced they will have a less expensive OLED series this year, the A75K series, since the A80K series basically gets the performance of last year's flagship, which is the A90J series. Sony has decided to bring in a lower cost option. The A75K series should have very similar picture quality to last year's A80J series, but then it gets a stripped down audio system, which is just fine, and it is only available in 55 and 65 inch sizes, which is less fine. Unlike the 60 Hz LG A1 and A2 series OLEDs, though, Sony's A75K still use 120 Hz panels and include two HDMI 2.1 ports. So.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised about that, to be honest, because Sony typically doesn't go for the lower price point, but I guess since they're moving the performance of the A90J series down to the A80K series for this year, they're like, hey, what replaces the A80J directly? Well, it's going to be this A75K series. And I threw it in there just because I wanted Tom to stumble over the model names. That was my only reason.
I don't doubt that is absolutely 100% true. I just don't understand why they can't just come up with a more like even the Denon models make more sense than this. Like the Denon models are like AVR dash either X or whatever the other one is, or S, and then the model number, which the first number indicates which kind of level it's at, and the other one indicates what year it came out. And it's not that. I mean, it's fine, and they put an H or a W after it.
Same, you know, Sony. If it's an A, it's an OLED. If it's an X, and it's an LCD. If it's a Z, then it's a 8K. That's that's what they're doing, and then the series number, and then the letter of the alphabet corresponds to the year that it came out. So it's not that different. It's just more difficult to say out loud because A80J is not exactly easy to pronounce. But that's gone now. That was last year. It's A80K now. So much easier.
Yeah, so much easier. Samsung has set the prices for their 89-inch, 101-inch, and 114-inch prefabricated micro LED TVs. So they're going to be 80 grand, 90 grand, and 100 grand respectively. So, yeah. It's affordable. Well, that is obviously very expensive. It's about a 35% price drop from the 110-inch model they were selling last year for $155,000. Updated manufacturing processes are responsible for reduction in prices. Instead of a single chip pick and place, they can now transfer multiple groups of chips all at once, making the whole process 15 times faster. The graphic says 1,500 times, but Samsung stated that it's 1,500%.
Yes. 1,500% is 15 times.
Yeah.
Definitely not the same thing.
Not the same thing.
And
not the same thing.
Yeah, it's nice to see that that the process is getting faster. I'm still waiting for. I've heard about they have or not even like prototype models, not even pre-production prototype models, where the entire backplane right now they're still using circuit boards. And the entire backplane of the prototype is TFT, just like a thin film transistor, just like an LCD screen. Once they can get that going, that should bring prices way, way down. But right now, they've just increased the speed with which they can put the micro LEDs onto the circuit boards.
Right. I guess there's now new circuit boards that allow the micro LED chips to be placed closer together, which is why the new 89-inch size can still be 4K. So now they're getting closer and closer. I can't wait till they're 8K.
That's right.
I actually can wait because I do not care. Let's get to some questions here. Justin wants to plug his Sonos Connect into a small stereo amplifier. He just needs to power a pair of speakers in a 10 by 12 room, but he'd also like to power some headphones. And he likes to experiment with different pairs, some of which are quite difficult to drive. So looking around, he came across Emotiva's BasX A2M Flex Amp, which is, it's the one that constantly adds the protein powder to your Amazon wish list. It's 50 watts per channel, Class AB, but it has a somewhat rare ability to power its headphone jack using the same amps. So there's gobs of power available for headphones if it's desired, I guess. At $300, he'd be fine with the price, but we seem to be kind of down on Emotiva lately. So what's our take on the A2M Flex Amp? I am really not down on Emotiva. I'm down on Emotiva processor.
Yes, that is specifically where we have not been fans.
I recommend Emotiva amps all the time. And I would have no problems with you buying this one. In fact, I use an Emotiva headphone thingy called the Stealth X something. I don't remember what it's called anymore. Anyways, they don't sell it anymore. But I use that for my reviews because it has two headphone jacks in the front, and it's very convenient. Now you can't individually set the volume for each of the headphone jacks, which would be perfect for what I do with them, which is AB headphones. But it's pretty close. I mean, it's about as good as I can.
Still a bit more convenient than other setups. At least it's not a physical unplug and replug, just turning a volume knob in that case. But that's not exactly the feature set that we're talking about here. But this this BasX A2M Flex Amp, I'm pretty much all in favor of you getting it, Justin. I think it's
$300 not that bad either, really. For
not that bad. And I mean, since you want to be able to power speakers with it, and yes, 50 watts per channel will be absolutely fine for a 10-foot by 12-foot room, and then have a wide range of flexibility when it comes to powering headphones. I will say Emotiva themselves, give a warning right on the product page and in the manual. In order to switch between, it has a little chip just for powering the headphone jack, but then you have the option of switching a jumper inside of the case to use the speaker amplifiers out of the headphone jack instead. So it's not a It's not a total trivial thing to switch between. You're actually opening it up, going inside and switching a jumper, and they're like, be super careful, because headphones, regular headphones, are not designed for this much power. It's really only electrostatic headphones that typically come with their own amplifier with them, where this would be appropriate to use the built-in speaker amplifier to power headphones. So be very, very careful with that option. But that option exists. You can, put that jumper in place and turn the volume way, way down if you think that the built-in headphone amplifier, which is already a pretty decent wattage headphone amplifier, just the regular headphone amplifier chip that's built in there. So you've got the full range available to you, and I have no problem recommending Emotiva amplifiers.
Yeah, I've reviewed a lot of headphones, and I've reviewed more than most people have ever heard of planar magnetic headphones. And if you're not listening at really crazy volumes, which you shouldn't be with headphones on anyways, never really had that many problems. I mean, I know they're really hard to drive headphones that exist out there.
Well, yeah, like I said, the electrostatic ones, and they typically come with a little outboard box to step up the voltage from what you would be getting from any headphone jack. That typically comes with them, because they're just not going to work without it.
Yeah, if you're not doing something like that, most of the time you can... Most headphones, you can get more power and get louder and maybe a little bit more clarity if you're having some noise issues, but it's just not really, it doesn't really happen. Anyways, Eric, it's a topic we discussed multiple times, but it's still a bit difficult to fully comprehend the whole mixing of absorption and diffusion issue. Well, just listen to me, which is, don't put diffusion. That's it. It seems like a mix of both types of acoustic treatments is the most widely recommended advice. It's also the least, I think, useful of the advices that you could get, because I don't think you need diffusion most of the time.
Certainly not wrong, though. If you look around, the recommendation is
you
for
are right.
mix.
And it depends on, and this is becoming exceedingly clear to me as I look around, because in order to write articles for AV Gadgets, rather than just me trying to come up with something to write about, or just writing about whatever products have been released lately, which most of them I just won't cover because I'm like, this is boring. Like I wouldn't read this about this product. I don't know why anybody else would either. Is I go to websites and forums and subreddits and stuff like that, and then look to see what questions people are actually asking, and then I get to see the advice that people are giving, and I'm like, I am continually shocked that there is some advice that's still being given. Like I thought we had dispelled this one a long time ago, and it's still going around. So you're right. This is the most widely recommended advice is that you need both, and I disagree. But Eric is just having some trouble wrapping his head around what exactly he should do. He definitely has FOMO about it, or fear of missing out. How would he know whether he's treated his room perfectly or not? Well, you're never going to be comfortable answering that question, usually because you don't trust your own judgment. And in order to have that confidence, you would have to have somebody come in who you view as an expert. Now, that could be Rob, or it could be a professional, installer that you've talked to and trust. Then you would have that kind of confidence. But the way that, first of all, we talk about what you should be doing all the time, which is, about 30% of your room should have some ability to absorb sound. You're probably not going to get anywhere near there, and that's going to be fine. If you do, then that's great. And if you get past there, that's probably okay too. As far as diffusion, I would highly suggest that you not ever worry about diffusion. I feel like diffusion is something that you're like... I feel like there's still a problem happening here, and then you ask us, and Rob says, oh, this could be because you need a little bit of diffusion, so you're a little overabsorbed. Why don't you put a diffuser above your head? And then you do that, and that's how that gets fixed. But for most people, in most cases, there are enough... it's not just flat walls and absorption panels. There are other things in the room that tent, like bookshelves and places where they keep their movies, or just furniture, and it all has a sort of diffusive sort of effect there. So I just don't think it's that big of a deal. That being said, how can you be confident? buy a UMic 1 from Cross Spectrum Labs, figure out how to use Room EQ Wizard, take a measurement, take a couple measurements in your room,
more than
add a bunch of add all your panels, do all the measurements again, look at the difference and say, this is the difference I was looking for.
Yeah, the 100-foot view of this, the overarching, because I think that's what Eric is really sort of asking for. He's like, I want to wrap my head around the general concept and then get down to what do I actually need to do in my room. If we start with just a bare, flat, completely untreated, no furniture, nothing, just a rectangle of room, everything is flat and hard surfaces. All right,
no doors.
That is
they just dropped you in there and sealed it.
Right. That is not literally the most reverberant room you could have. There are rooms even more reverberant than that, which would be like curved and stuff like that. But that's going to be about as bad as it would be in a rectangular room. And if you think about any sound source in there, any speaker in that room, there's going to be direct sound that makes its way at higher frequencies straight from the speaker to your ear. But any sound that reflects is going to bounce like a billiard ball off of every one of those surfaces. The angle coming into the wall is going to be the same as the angle going out. And you can imagine all of these directional sound waves that are just going to bounce off all of these hard, flat surfaces like a billiard ball would around the banks of a pool table. And it's going to take a considerable amount of time before, just through sheer distance of travel, those sounds lose energy. They will lose energy over time.
Oh yeah, of course.
But it's going to be a significant amount of time because, it is an inverse square law. They get that much weaker over that distance, but we're talking about relatively small distances for sound waves. And so it's going to take a long time. That room is going to reverberate. You're going to make a pop sound and you're going to hear that echoing around that room for a while. So let's say all we put into that room was diffusion. No absorption at all, just diffusion panels. What would happen? Diffusion panels only have, theoretically, if you made diffusion panels super, super deep, and there are some crazy rooms in the world that are like this, the rooms themselves are way bigger than you might ever imagine because visually they have like 20-foot deep diffusion panels on every surface, right? So the room started out like 80 by 80 and it looks like it's 20 by 20 by the time you finish up in there. But you can have these huge diffusion panels and they exist, but it is just mathematical. The depth of that diffusion panel has to be at least a quarter of the wavelength that it's treated. It can't treat anything that's shorter than a quarter of the wavelength that you're going for. So if you're trying to treat all the way down to like 20 hertz with this diffusion, then you need like 17, 18 foot deep diffusion on every surface of the room. And then you run into other problems if they're that big because you start getting like interleaving reverberance between the like leaves of the diffuser, and there's crazy stuff trying to treat the entire frequency range with just diffusion. So typically when we're talking about the type of diffusers you might be able to purchase from a place like GIC, they're really only treating the upper mid-range and into the treble. So let's imagine you put a bunch of that into your room and nothing else. What would happen? Well, all of the frequencies below that, most of the mid-range and all of the bass, it's still reverberating in this room exactly like the original bare hard flat room was. Only those upper mid-range and the treble frequencies are now being diffused. Now, what does diffusion do? It just means that you are more quickly making those sound waves travel a greater distance, because instead of them coming in and hitting the flat wall and bouncing off like a pool ball, now they're kind of scattering when they hit the wall. So it means that you're still just relying on them traveling distance to lose energy. That's what diffusion does. It makes those upper frequencies travel a greater distance, because every time they hit a wall, they're scattering off at a different angle than they normally would, and they end up traveling a greater distance than if you just had the hard flat walls, and that makes them quieter. Diffusion makes high frequencies quieter than hard flat walls. It doesn't increase your decay times, it decreases them, but not as much as absorption. And so that's the last part. What happens when you bring in absorption into the room? Absorption treats a wider range of frequencies. If it's thick enough, it can effectively treat down into bass frequencies. And when the sound wave hits the absorption, it just loses energy right there. It's going to reflect more like the pool ball, but it's like a really squishy bumper on the pool table. It loses a bunch of energy when it hits that absorption. That's what's going on there. So this is why in small rooms, you can treat all of your acoustic issues with absorption only.
Right.
It's when you get into much, much larger spaces that you might potentially find diffusion in the measurements to be more valuable, because what might happen in a very large space is, because it's a very large space, all the sound waves are losing energy just from the distances that they're traveling. You put in a bunch of absorption and bass trapping into a very large space, and when you look at the decay time measurements, the slope of how long it takes for the bass to decay versus the treble to decay, the treble has 0 decay time. It's 1 millisecond, and the bass still has some, and the whole room sounds dead because of it. It sounds weird when you get this really steep slope between what the decay times are in the bass versus what the decay times are in the treble. In these small rooms that we have in a typical home theater, we don't really run into that issue. It's theoretically possible if you covered 100% of the surfaces in your room with 8-inch thick absorption. The treble might sound overly dead, and you might say, I actually need to bring some hard surfaces back into this room to make it not sound weird. So combo panels can have their place. We've mentioned if you never want to use multiple subwoofers, if you only want to passively treat your room, and therefore you are covering 100% of the surfaces in your room with 8 to 10-inch thick absorption.
Yeah, nobody's doing that.
Nobody's doing that, but theoretically this could come back in. In fact, you might not even want combo panels that are actually diffusion. You might just want to have some hard, flat surfaces on top of some of that absorption, which is why the membrane panels make a lot of sense in those things. So it comes a bit down to room size. It comes down to the decay times. That's what we're going to look at. If we're talking about these measurements you're going to take, it's going to be looking at the decay times. And where you would say, oh, we need some diffusion in this room, is when the slope between bass and treble is either way too steep and the decay times in the bass are just much, much longer than the decay times in the treble, or if you're looking at it, you go, you know what, everything up to the upper mid-range and treble looks okay, but above that we're seeing some weird squiggles, and that can happen in irregularly shaped rooms. In irregularly shaped rooms, sometimes you get some, because there's a very specific reflection that's happening, and it just happens to line up with your main seat in an irregularly shaped room, and you might go, oh, you know what, for that particular thing, it's only affecting us in the treble. Some diffusion right on the surface where that particular reflection is coming from, that's going to help us out there. So it's not that there's never a place for it. In irregularly shaped rooms, there's a maybe higher likelihood it would be able to help you, but you got to look at the decay times. And you could still treat that with absorption, and that would work too.
And I guess that's, so if you look at high-end cable manufacturers, and they'll talk about things like skin effect and some of these other phenomenon that are real things that happen with electricity passing through cables, but what they don't tell you is that it only happens at extremely high power over extreme distances with extremely thick cables. Okay, so they're this is the same thing for me. If you are the type of person who has a room where diffusion will, because of the size of the room, will certainly be warranted, you are not doing it yourself. And you've hired somebody, and they will know that. So that means that if you're asking me how much diffusion you should put in your room is small enough that I could say 0 amount, right, and be right 99% of the time.
And that's why when you see some of these interviews with Anthony Grimani or Dennis Erskine and that, they're dealing with, rooms that start at $350,000 minimum. That's the starting. They don't look at you unless you're spending that much money. And the room is starting at 30 by 50 feet. And you're getting, and often they're dealing with, open concept. Everything is marble and glass. And it's you get some of these weird reflections. And because of the looks, they don't want to absorb it. There's a multitude of things where, yes, it's not that they're lying. These guys are talking about, they're not lying about this stuff. But in the types of rooms that most of our audience is talking about, you start with the absorption for sure. If you're hearing something, you clap your hands, you do the balloon pop test, and you're like, there's still something weird and it's only in the upper treble, then you take some measurements and give yourself some indication of, okay, maybe there is something here where diffusion has its place, but the likelihood is really low. That's where we're coming from.
when you're listening to those guys, it's very much like listening to like a Formula One race car pit crew talk about brakes. You know, what they're talking about is true, but it doesn't apply to your minivan. You know, it's not like you need to go buy calipers that have, or whatever it is that they say. I don't know. So it's the same sort of deal. What they're saying is true. It just it isn't really applicable to your situation. So, you know, too often, you know, people hear or people see pictures and they assume that that's the way things should be. And for a long time, I mean, I used to suggest on this podcast, well, you know, if you've got absorption panels on your wall and you want to put some more stuff up there, put diffusion panels between, you know, the empty spaces. I mean,
the chances that it's going to hurt something is really low. And if it's about looks, like, I kind of like the way GIK is approaching things now, because they barely have their diffusion products anymore. They've got a small number, and most of the time they're like, yeah, we've got our alpha and impression panels, they're combo panels. Mostly what's actually helping your sound is the absorption in there. But if you like the looks, then we've got these options. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty much the way to come at it. It's kind of more about the looks at this point.
Yeah, it's just so generally not. If you come to me and ask me for my advice on something, I'm going to give you what I think is, you know, the bang for buck suggestions. And bang for buck, absorption, 100% of the time in 100% of the applications in your home theater. Yeah. And I'm never going to suggest just diffusion because it's literally aesthetic. To me, I believe it's aesthetic for most people. Well,
it's this very limited frequency range doing a very specific job, and so the chances of it being the generally good advice really, really low. But once you start looking at the waterfall graphs, you start looking at the LT60 charts, and you're going to, like, this is comparing across all of your seats, across the entire range of frequencies. And if you're seeing this weird anomaly that's only in the upper mid-range and treble, like that, it's really rare. But it's not that it never happens. Sometimes it happens, but that's what we need to look at. So I hope that helps, Eric, to get.
Which it kind of goes back to what I said at the beginning. Put absorption everywhere, and if you hear something weird, then we can then you might need some diffusion. But chances are you're going to be done after you put the absorption everywhere. Daryl recently changed his entire speaker setup from SVS to Focal Chora series. The Focal Chora series. He kept his dual SVS SB3000 subs, but changed the Chora towers and center up front, along with the Focal in-wall and in-ceiling speakers for his surround backs and his 4 overheads. His room is completely open on the right-hand side to his kitchen. He's loving the difference for both music and home theater. So now he's already thinking about his next upgrade, but he's concerned about diminishing returns. You think? He has the Focal Kanta series in mind. He just wants to know if we've heard them and would expect them to be a worthwhile upgrade. See, the fact that you mentioned a bunch of gear and absolutely no room treatments tells me that and I actually wrote something about this kind of recently where I was talking about how come people, you know, like you've upgraded your speakers but you don't hear a difference, or you've upgraded your gear and you don't hear a difference. You know, and if you assume that the gear, the speakers you bought are better than the old speakers, why might you not hear a difference? And the answer is like 99% of the time it's because your room is having too much of an effect.
But he did hear a difference. Enough that he's very happy with the change that he made. And SVS, I don't know whether he was starting with SVS Prime or SVS Ultra. I would be a little bit surprised if it were SVS Ultra, but SVS Prime, those are no slouch. So the fact that he preferred the Focal Chora series, I don't have any beef with that. You heard what you heard. But it's not like you were starting with something bad if it was SVS Prime. So, yeah, I mean, the Focal Kanta series, I have not heard them in person yet.
They're expensive.
They are very expensive. These are the least expensive of the Focal line that includes their beryllium tweeters. This is the starting point for their beryllium tweeters is the Kanta series. There are the Sopra series and the, what's the series?
Aria?
I think Aria is a step down. It's one below that.
I don't know. I'm just reading what
Utopia. Utopia is the
Oh.
flagship. Yeah, those ones have it. But Kanta is the least expensive with the beryllium tweeters. Now there used to be the Performance BE series, which I really, really, really liked, and the Kanta sort of replaced that. The Kanta are even more expensive than that series used to be. But now the weird thing is, I have not heard them, but I've seen measurements of them, and across the board, the measurements that have been done on them show a pretty tipped up treble. Like, even I might call them bright. I don't like a lot, because reviews always call speakers bright when they're looking for something to criticize, but the measurements indicate that the Kanta Series speakers, even I would say, that I would expect from the measurements I've seen of them, those to be some pretty bright speakers. Not necessarily shocking. They're probably targeting that market. Maybe a little bit older listeners with some high frequency hearing loss.
The market of people who can afford $10,000 to $15,000 speakers tend to be the people who also have some hearing loss on the top end. So if you look at Macintosh speakers too, they are very much that way as well. They're tipped up in the top end, because if you can afford it, you probably need a little bit extra treble. So what I would say to you, if you are considering getting into this price class, Daryl, there is no chance. If you came to me and said, I've listened to 10 different pairs of speakers in this price range, and these are the ones I think I like best, I would still tell you to audition more, because this is now into the price class where you've got to audition and hear them for yourself in your room. I mean, the dealer should allow you to bring home one pair of bookshelf speakers out of this series and at least audition those in your room, given the sort of price class that you're getting into. And these are dealer-only speakers that we're talking about. Sure. I would be looking at the Revel Ultima series again, because I mean, getting those beryllium tweeters or, man-made diamond tweeters or the ribbon tweeters, like, you're going to be getting up into the higher price ranges with any of those technologies. So it's going to be Revel Ultima series. It's going to be maybe the highest end RBH speakers. You might be looking at something like those. I mean, maybe KEF reference even, like, something like that. I mean, there's no way I would tell you, oh yeah, if you love the Focal Chora series, go get the Kanta series. That's the end of it. I'm like, no, you've got to audition everything that you can. Yeah. When I think about this price point, the 10 to 15 plus $1,000 price point, I really kind of feel like you should be that you start thinking about having more than one system, even if the systems are in the same room, and that includes me thinking very strongly about electrostatic speakers.
Sure.
Electrostatic speakers that yes, the sweet spot is very small, but the effect of listening to and experiencing an electrostatic speaker in all of its glory is undeniably a different listening experience than you've ever had before. It's different than headphones. It's better than headphones. It's different than a surround sound system. I wouldn't say it's better, but it certainly has a lot of it'll change how you think about high end audio when you experience an electrostatic. Like, to me, I would not I don't really feel like I just want my surround sound system to be better when I start thinking about these price points. I want to have a different experience, and one that well, in a way that looks like exactly what Focal went. Again, I'm just going by the measurements, but like this isn't a case of it's just the Chorus series but refined and better. It's like, no, the measurements indicate that it's a different sound going to this series. So I mean, that, but like Rob said, I think you need to listen to a ton of stuff, and you need to not just think about upgrading all of your speakers. He's into the Perlisten, the new THX Dominus Perlisten series is in this sort of price range. Those are using beryllium tweeters as well. Like, those, you got to hear them all, as far as I'm concerned. I would agree. Yeah, there's no way I would say, go get the Kantas, you're done. Not a chance. Yeah, I would take my time. I would take my time with this. Carlos has a pair of SVS SB16 Ultra subs, one in the middle of his front wall and the other in the middle of his back wall. He has always had his couch just 2 feet away from his back wall, but he recently moved it an extra foot, so that he has 3 feet behind his couch now. He has a Denon X4300H receiver and used the Odyssey Editor app many times. When his couch was 2 feet from the back wall, it would always show a 7 or 8 dB dip at 60 hertz, and would set his rear sub to the -7 for its trim level. Now that he has moved his couch back, moves his couch to 3 feet from the back wall, that 60 hertz dips is improved to only 3 or 4 dB, and his rear sub's trim was set to +3. He didn't adjust the settings on the subs themselves at all. So he's seen a lot of people say online that your trim level should always be 0 or negative numbers. I literally wrote an article about this.
Yes, you did.
I just cannot stand. I want to go through the computer to every single person that says that and just grab them by the lapel and say, why? Why? What do you think? Because
they think that you're being robbed of headroom by having a positive trim level.
If you go to the positive, you're being robbed, and you might clip the subwoofer signal. Now, this is a thing that actually happened with like one stupid receiver a million years ago, and it has hung on like a mole, and it will just, and you remove it and it comes back. It is the worst. So he asks if the +3 setting is an issue. Guess my response.
It is absolutely not an issue. I mean,
it has nothing to do with headroom. Nothing.
The new criticism, because this is pretty much all coming from Audio Science Review, the new criticism is that bass management, and having these trim levels set in your receiver, that's a bad thing because the headroom is reserved, right? The signal comes in, and that extra 10 or 12 decibels of headroom that might be used if you went to like the full +10 or +12 setting in the trim level, that's reserved. It's there in case you need it. There's nothing wrong with using it, and so now there's the new criticism that you only ever want to use analog inputs in direct mode because otherwise you're robbing the signal of potential headroom or some such nonsense. That's nonsense too. +3 is totally fine. That's the bottom line. It's going to keep going forever, Tom. We're never going to be
honest
free
with you. I do not understand why people insist that having knowledge, or I'm going to put knowledge in quotes here, air quotes, that having knowledge that is different than the general consensus of anybody who has a rational thought in their head somehow makes them more important and smarter than everybody else. It does happen that you can have an opinion that is contrary to popular held beliefs, but introducing a new concept and saying this is why this is important, even though it is frankly and demonstrably and easily Googleably wrong, does not make you better or smarter than everybody else. It just makes you weird. And no one likes you. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm going to get banned from Reddit one of these days. You'll see. Okay, so why did moving the couch just 1 foot make that much of a difference in the trim level setting? Welcome to the wonderful world of subwoofer, sound wave interactions in your room. You were sitting at a point where essentially there was a lot of gain going on, right?
Yeah.
And so it was cutting. It was
at
cutting
some
your
of the
levels.
frequencies. He had one particular dip that is now better that he's moved a foot away, but then other frequencies had a boost in them when you were 2 feet from the back wall, and now there's less of a boost when you're 3 feet from the back wall.
So just think about this. So it's set. We cannot boost dips. Okay, we can't boost dips, but we can cut the highs. So what was happening was you had enough boosting just by the wave interactions in your room. It had enough boosting going on that you're at the overall trim level needed to come down so that it could adjust everything where it needed to be, so that you got a relatively flat. Even though you had this dip, you had a relatively flat. So when you moved your couch forward, you not only adjusted that dip up some, which probably wasn't affected by the subwoofer, by the Odyssey room calibration at all. So you moving your couch up fixed that dip, but then it also tamped down on a lot of those boosts that were going on. So now you no longer have that. And what does this mean for you? Well, nothing. It doesn't mean anything. It means that your room calibration had to do something different to get to where it was trying to go in the first place, and it got there a little bit better because you moved your couch a foot. And everybody who doesn't want to move their seat to make their room sound or their experience sound or look better should take a lesson from you and know that just a foot can make a big difference in how you experience sound.
Yeah, if you were to picture, imagine that your rectangle of a room was just all filled with water and you had, two, vibrating things at either end of the room and they're going up and down. You imagine what that interaction of waves would look like. Yeah. And you're going to have all these different wave patterns and you move a foot in any direction, and exactly the way that wave pattern looks is different now. It's different from spot to spot in the room. That is why it's such a tricky thing. That's why trying to get uniformity in your base is so important, because then if we're going to equalize it, it's going to affect all positions in the room rather than it being from spot to spot a wildly different experience. This is why level matching your subs is tricky. It's why, you know, the recommendation from like Home Theater Gurus is to gain match your subs instead, because the chances are, as you take your measurements in all of the seats in your room, and he's primarily dealing with ones that, you know, 2 rows of seats, at least 3 seats in each row. And once you start trying to level match across all 6 or more of those seats, you're just like, this is a losing battle. I fix it in one spot and it goes worse in another. So, you know, I appreciate the approach over there that he takes. He's like, look, just get subs that are essentially as close to identical as possible, or, you know, actually identical. Gain match them, and then we're going to worry about the rest of it later, because it is such a difficult proposition. You move that 1 foot, and what used to be -7 is now +3. And that is exactly what happens when you're playing that pink noise. So, yeah, doing the level matching is a challenge. It's why our advice now is to just do it as mono subs, not use the sub EQ HT that sets the individual trim and distance levels for the subwoofers. Just treat them like the single bass producing thing that they actually are in your room size. So yeah, that's where we've come back to it.
Okay, so last question of the day.
Quite possibly. Sean's goes all the way up to T, so we're going to try and not spend much time on each question here, Sean.
I'm going to say, for those of you asking questions, we may need to curb this whole I'm going to ask 1,000 questions all at once. You need to have a little bit more self-control and ask a couple of questions and then wait a week or 2 before you ask some more. This is not the Sean show, Sean.
Nonetheless, here we go.
Sean has a big project and oodles of questions. He's put in an addition on his house that will include a new garage. The old garage is going to get turned into his home theater. The total dimensions of the old garage are 19 by 29, but they're going to construct a hallway that will be 5 feet wide, and they'll be framing within the existing structure, so the interior dimensions of the theater should end up being about 17 by 24. When he goes to a movie theater, he likes to sit quite close to the screen in front of the halfway point, about a third to 40% of the theater's length from the screen. So his dream is to have a very large screen in there with 2 rows of seats.
He likes to sit really close to the screen.
Yeah, no, I got it. I was just looking. I thought the length was not what it was. 24 is fine for 2 rows of seats. So his dream to have a very large screen in there with 2 rows of seats, and since the screen is going to be very large, he's thinking it would probably need to be acoustically transparent. Visually, he'd be fine with seeing the speakers, but the center might end up basically on the floor if it needs to go below the screen in his dream setup. That's fine. He's also trying to budget for the entire project. He's comfortable with pretty much all of it being DIY, and he's trying to keep the cost of constructing, treating, decorating all of the home theater equipment in the $20,000 to $30,000 range. He would really love to be able to give his theater a Star Wars Imperial Starship look. That is going to be on you, my man. I'm not helping you with that.
We're not really the ones to tell you how to do that type of decorating.
No. You in your paint and your choices of other things is going to have to do that.
But that's germane to some other things, so that's why I put it in the intro to all of this. Yeah. Here we go.
For the general layout of the room, do we agree that he should go with an acoustically transparent screen mounted to a false wall? And should he orient the room so that the false wall is closest to the hallway and therefore the entrance will be on the front wall? It would go in one of the front corners. Or should the hallway be closest to the back of the theater? That way the doorway could be in the middle of the back wall. He's thinking that if it's important to have access to what's behind the false wall, it might be easiest to have the front of the theater closest to the hallway. But he also likes the idea of having the screen mounted on a sort of hydraulic system so that it be lifted to reveal the speakers behind the screen. What do we think is best? How are you?
So there's a couple of diagrams if you scroll down at the top in the notes there. In the second diagram, which is what I'm showing on YouTube right now, he did not include the front false wall. He didn't. But I much prefer the orientation where the door is at the back. First of all, I think this is a setup where you can have surround back speakers, and that's going to be tricky if if you set things up the other way. You're not going to be able to do the corner bass trapping if you have the false wall at the closest to the hallway. So I'm in favor of door in the middle of the back wall being adjacent to the hallway, and then I would still have a false wall up at the front of the room, because I think what's going to end up happening is 4 feet from the back wall to the back of your second row, 6 feet from the second row to the first row, 12 feet from the first row to the screen, and then a 2-foot false wall. That's how I would lay this out, and I would have the back wall adjacent to the hallway.
Whatever, it's fine.
Okay.
Acoustically treating the room and making it look like the interior of an Imperial starship go hand in hand. He's mainly thinking he would like to frame within the constructed walls, put all his acoustic treatments within the framing, and then cover everything with fabric. But for some of the design work and aesthetics, it might be easiest and cheapest if he could use painted foam to make whatever shapes he wants. So will exposed painted foam act as a room treatment with about something like rigid Owens Corning insulation? Okay, so he's got pictures here.
Just examples of some
examples,
of the things.
Yeah. So, yeah, I would just do. First of all, if you paint acoustic foam, I don't know because I've never seen anybody do this. But first of all, I would buy the foam and the color you wanted to do it with if you were going to use this. I would assume that the foam was not acoustic treatments and it was just
aesthetic. I mean, foam
aesthetic.
Isn't a great acoustic treatment, just full stop. So it would be just for the modeling purposes. But if I'm looking at, some of the interior shots of the, Star Destroyers, the Imperial starships and that, like, to me, all of this can be done with wood framing. Like,
I think so too.
All of that is doable with wood framing. I mean, particularly the panels where there's the lights sort of showing through. That can just be white fabric or an actual light behind there, and then you've got just a wood lattice structure that goes in front of it. All of the framing, because it's sort of this rounded triangles, rounded trapezoid looks. That's what gives the distinct look of the Imperial starships. And all of that to me would be wood framing. So to me, I don't think I would do this in foam. I think I would frame out the room, and then you can use just fabric and lattices to give you all the looks that you want inside. That's my take.
Yes, that's what I would do. And then anywhere that you have space back there, I would put the rigid
insulation.
Fiberglass.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then you might be the person that ends up needing a little bit of diffusion. Who knows? But if you have this weird lattice of lights here, you might end up with a little diffusion, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
For the fabric, he's considering Acoustimax DMD fabric.
Yeah.
It's definitely acoustically transparent. It's less expensive than Gulford of Maine, which seems to get mentioned all the time. But is there even a less expensive option? I don't know if there's a less expensive option, but I will tell you that if you go to your local fabric store and just be a weirdo and put your mouth up to anything that's in there and try to breathe through it, if you don't feel any resistance, it's acoustically transparent. So you could literally just do that and find fabric that is either on sale or is the right color or has a pattern on it that you think is starship like, and do it that way as well.
I really like Acoustimax fabrics. Not only do they have DMD, but they have acoustically transparent suede that is also available. And it ends up being a little bit more expensive than the DMD because the DMD is a wider bolt. So the suede is not quite as wide a bolt of fabric, so you're not getting exactly the same amount of fabric per linear foot, but the price per linear foot is the same. It's just not as wide a bolt. But I really like what Acoustimax offers. If that is exactly the look of the fabric that you want, I don't know a much better option. However, there is the option of getting various colors of speaker grill cloth from Parts Express. That's very inexpensive. Now, the thing there is, it is more easy to see through the speaker grill cloth than it is the Acoustimax DMD or suede fabric. So it matters a little bit what you put behind it, because if you do put like the yellow insulation, that's going to show through the speaker grill cloth a little bit more easily. But if you use Rockwool insulation, I mean, for the interior of a starship, you're going for all grays and blacks and whites. So if you use Rockwool, I think that'll work really well. So that's I would take a good look at that, the Parts Express speaker grill cloth, because they have it in grays and whites and blacks.
So he asks, how should he attach the fabric to the walls? Is there a track system we would recommend? He wants it to look really nice, clean, and professional. Well, it sort of depends on how you're going to attach all of this to the wall. So you're talking about putting a framing up there, and then building structures or whatever, and then adding fabric to it. So I think your thought process here is that you're going to add the fabric to the structure that's attached to the wall,
right?
Which is not what you have to do. You don't have to do it that way. You can do it by building a frame for the fabric and then attaching that, just basically stapling it to the frame and then attaching the frame to the structure that you built on the wall. So it'd be like kind of like hanging the picture. And the way I would do that, Velcro. I would Velcro the crap out of that thing. I mean
you're almost creating like speaker grills for your walls.
Yeah, that's exactly what you're doing. And that way you could take every single panel off and get back behind it. It's going to double the amount of wood that you're using, or maybe even more, because you'd have to build these new frames to go on top of what you put behind the wall. But then you could get to everything back there at any time. You're like, oh, I want to put a speaker back here now. Oh, I want to, now they have 17.2.36 and I want to be able to put speakers all over my room. Well, now you could just pull off your little, essentially speaker grills from your wall, carve out a thing of insulation, install a shelf, and run the cabling back there without any problems whatsoever. So that's the way I would do it.
Okay. There are stretched fabric track systems. There are plastic tracks that you install on your walls, and then the fabric gets wedged into there. You sort of use a thing that looks like a pizza roller, except it's not sharp, and it just pushes the fabric into this plastic track that holds it. I'm going to have the link to Fabric Mate as the one that basically they're almost the only game in town for DIY, like where you, just a private individual, can go buy this stuff, because most of the other stretch fabric things are only available through installers. You sort of have to hire them to install it, and there are alternatives, but Fabric Mate is one you can buy for DIY. It is not cheap.
I was going to say, I think my solution's cheaper than this.
Well, that's just it. The fabric foot tracks, like every 5-foot section of track is like $10. It is really expensive. Yeah, when you total up,
because you're spend thousands of dollars on this.
Well, you're going to need a lot of it. My thinking was, if you did want to use the Fabric Mate, stretched fabric track system, that I would only use it in the places where I know I'm going to want to have the option of removing the fabric and getting to something behind it. Because looking at a lot of like the interior of the Starship type of designs that you're going for, a lot of that could be, you have the framing, you put the insulation into the framing for your acoustic treatments, you put the fabric over it, you just staple the fabric right to the framing, and then because there are the details of what the wood panel, or not wood, but whatever the panels are supposed to be inside of a Starship, but it's got those kind of shapes to it, that can just be a fascia, that goes over top of it, like trim. I'm just talking about putting trim over top of it, hides all the staples, right? Just like you would put wainscoting or something like that in a regular one. This is like fancier, made to look like Starship wainscoting, and that's going to hide all your staples. So to me, anywhere where you don't need access behind the panels anymore, I would finish it that way. I would just have trim that covers all the staples. Anywhere that you do need access, I would either do Tom's, Velcroed on, essentially a speaker grill design, or maybe you go for the Fabric Mate design. I would do a combo.
So as mentioned, he's thinking he will frame inside the walls to give him the aesthetic look he wants, and then fill that framing with probably Owens Corning 703 installation. We talk about corner bass trapping all the time. Does that need to be something different? Does he cut just triangles of 703 and glue them together? Does he have to buy something special? You don't have to glue them. Just stack them on top of each other from floor to ceiling. They will not crush under their own weight. You'll be fine. I mean, if you're really worried about it, put a little shelf halfway up the wall and stack up to the bottom of the shelf, and then whatever.
And again, I would probably go for the Roxel, just because if you end up using speaker grill cloth, I think that'll be easier to cover without seeing the yellow color, because the Owens Corning is yellow.
I have yellow. I have black speaker cloth over every single one of my panels in here, and I don't see yellow through them at all. Okay. So I wouldn't worry about it.
And I was also going to say, like, just looking at the shapes of the inside of the Imperial starships, like, it doesn't have to be triangles in the corners. You can have rectangular shapes in the corners, because they've got these sort of, like, again, it's all these sort of rounded trapezoidal, rounded triangular shapes.
You can actually build a frame that goes all the way around, like your the back of your room, or the front of your room, whatever part of the room it is that you're gonna, and then you just fill all that with insulation all the way around.
It's essentially bulkhead and soffit, just with an interesting shape. Bulkhead and soffit, you're just gonna frame it, have the insulation inside it, and cover it with fabric instead of a solid surface. That's how I would do your corners.
He asks, should there be diffusion?
See or above answer.
Yeah, see or above answer. I don't think that you will need it.
Yeah.
If you really fill every single available bay here with insulation, you may. In which case, my solution of making everything a picture, like a speaker grill that you can just pull off, means you can go, oh, it's a little weird sounding in here. I wish I had diffusion. Where should I put it? Tom and Rob say I should put it here. Boop, boop. Take the insulation out.
Yeah.
Put in a diffusion panel back there, or just some sort of scatter plate, and then pop it back up.
You could even put some like slats into the speaker grill that you've made, what we're calling the speaker grill, because then that becomes a scatter plate on the top of it.
Yeah. It would be very easy to add if you did it my way. For his front three speakers, he already owns some Klipsch reference towers and a large Klipsch reference center. He lives close to Power Sound Audio and is considering upgrading to those. He's also thinking about Arendelle speakers, but those would be even more expensive. Should he be looking to skimp on his budget elsewhere so that he can upgrade his front speakers right away? Should he try things out with his existing Klipsch reference speakers first?
You're going to have a false wall. You should save your money on speakers and use what you have right now. And because believe me, this room is going to end up costing you more than you're bargaining for. It always does.
Always does.
So I wouldn't like, if you said, I don't have any speakers, what should I consider? That's a different question. You've got perfectly serviceable speakers to use, and you're going to have a false wall so you can replace your speakers easily in the future. Don't even worry about new speakers right now.
I would get the room built first, and then see if you have any money left over, give us a call, then we'll see. But you're only allowed to ask one question. He has no idea what he should do when it comes to surround and surround back. Should they be in walls, on walls, regular bookshelf speakers hidden within the framing and fabric? Should he have two pairs of side surrounds, one for each row? So he's only got the front three? Is that what I'm meant to believe?
Well, that's all he mentioned that he owns, and this is what he said. He has no idea what to do for surrounds and backs and overheads. Yeah,
I don't know that. I mean, you could go with like an in-wall or on-wall. I mean, I would never go for an in-wall option when you've got bays that you're going to be building here. I would do an on-wall and then put it behind the speaker grill fabric that you're going to be mounting up everywhere, or just a regular satellite style. I mean, you don't need a big speaker in here. The problem is that you've got Klipsch, and it's exceedingly
and
hard
everything
to find.
else that he's considering is high efficiency too. He seems to be on board with high efficiency, high output speakers. I got no beef with that, and it's not like your room is tiny. I would probably point you to Klipsch's on-wall speakers, to be honest. Because I think that's going to work well. It's their reference premier designer on-wall speakers. Now they're not cheap. They're not cheap. They're like around $280 each. So these are not inexpensive speakers, but given what you want to do with the design of this room, it gives you so much flexibility because they're these flat on-wall speakers that you'll be able to mount anywhere. You'll be able to hide them behind fabric panels if you want to. You can use them on your ceiling. You can use them on your walls. And yes, I would have two pairs of side surrounds with the design that you have. I would have one pair of side surrounds for each of the rows of seats that you want to have. So I would definitely look at those. I would also look at HSU. HSU, their regular bookshelf speakers, horn-loaded bookshelf speakers, or if you do decide in some particular spots that you really want them to be in-wall, then they have their horn-loaded in-wall speakers too, and those are much more affordable. Those are $300 a pair, so only $150 each. So I would look at both of those. They're going to match up nicely with just about anything else that you're considering.
Right, I agree with the two sets of side surrounds and stuff as well. So he already owns one Power Sound Audio V3600i subwoofer. It's a huge dual 18-inch driver model, 25 by 20 by 44 inches tall.
Massive.
So it's not going to fit in your front wall.
Well, sideways. You could turn it sideways because 20 inches wide, so that'll fit into a 2-foot
I guess that's right. Yeah, you have to turn it sideways.
Which is fine.
He says it's a discontinued model, so should he be looking to pair it with a current subwoofer model, or should he be getting 2 or 4 brand new subs? He also wouldn't mind DIY, so what do you suggest as far as subwoofers go? Anybody says I don't mind DIY, I usually think they have no idea what they're getting themselves into.
I don't like he's building the whole room. He's finishing the whole room.
He sounds like he knows what he's talking about, so there are some options out there for you. I would definitely take a pre-designed, and either buy all the parts and assemble it, or if you're that comfortable, get the design and follow it to a T. We've already had people on here who have, try to develop their subwoofers from scratch without having enough knowledge, and you're like, yeah, there's a reason why we put bracing in these things, just in case you're wondering.
No, I would look at the Marty subs for sure. I mean, that's
Sure.
You could actually just buy all the materials yourself and just follow their plans, or you can buy their flat packed, assembly required cabinets and then follow their guidelines for which drivers and amplifiers to put into it. And it's all Dayton stuff that you can purchase at Parts Express. So that is certainly a way to get high output. They have a multitude of different form factors of the Marty subs. So there's definitely something that's going to fit your needs there. I would have no problem from a performance standpoint pairing that up with your V3600i. If you have a physical place to put that, maybe at the back of your room, you could use the V3600i. You don't need the 2700 watts dual 18-inch drivers for the 24 by 17 foot room that you've got.
It's overkill.
It's complete overkill, but it's fine. It's got well more headroom than you need. Getting a subwoofer that has the right amount of headroom for your room size and pairing it with one that can do way more is not a problem. It's not like you're starting with one that isn't adequate and trying to beef it up. You're going the other direction. So there's no problem doing that. But I would definitely look at the Marty subs in your case. If I were to just point you to brand new subs that are the right size at the most affordable price, it would be HSU's VTF-15H Mark II. Those subs are, two of them is $2,400. That's with the shipping included. So, $1,200 a piece is what you're looking at for those. Maybe you end up with 4 of them. You could, for the type of prices that you're considering. But the Marty subs, I think, are up your alley.
I really don't feel like you need more than 2 subs in this room.
Nope,
I mean,
I don't think so either. I think you
could go 4 subs, but I think you're just. I would do literally everything else.
I think you get one of the 18-inch single driver, 18-inch Marty subs that's designed to fit nicely in the space of a false wall. And if you can fit that V3600i that you already have at the back of the room, I think that's the combo.
Yeah, if you build one of those bulkhead things we were talking about, and you could maybe put it in there.
Yeah.
For the ceiling speakers, he's certain he wants 3 pairs, but doesn't want to overspend, so you just use the monoprice Alpha series in ceiling speakers. I thought we liked the caliber ones better.
No, Alpha's the one that we do like.
Oh, Alpha. Okay.
But I'm just like, he's going for these high efficiency, high output speakers everywhere else. I'm tempted to say just use more of those clips on walls and have them up on your ceiling.
I mean, he's going to be sitting so close to the dang things anyways. I don't know.
I guess.
That the efficiency is going to make that much of a difference. I don't know. With 2 rows of seats, I very much... I have a problem with top middles.
Oh, really?
Basically, because I don't know where I don't know that I have a perfect place to put them. I mean, I know where I would put them, but I would,
I mean, pretty much straight above the front row, assuming your front row is the primary row.
Well, if that's going to be your primary row, yeah. But, I feel like you can get, a better overall experience for everybody if you just get top fronts and top, whatever it's called, top front, top rears. And just have them on either side of the rows. But if you're going to go 3, that's fine too.
Yeah, I don't have any beef with that. Yeah, I'm a little bit iffy on the monoprice Alphas. I would probably go for the HSU in walls and just build them a backer box if it's going to be in ceiling, or I'd get more of the clips on walls if you're also finishing the ceiling the way you're finishing your walls. I would kind of opt for that. It's just where I lean on this one.
Yeah, a lot of times I'm not worried about timbre matching, obviously, because these are Atmos speakers. That's not what I'm worried about. I worry about the efficiency differences and whether or not your especially if you end up upgrading from clips, which their efficiency numbers aren't always exactly accurate. They're sometimes a little bit inflated. But if you go with a really high efficiency set of speakers for your
power
fronts,
sound audios,
then you could get to the point where those alphas maybe you can't quite level match them exactly right, depending on how far away they are from the measurement microphone. So I guess that would be the argument for going for higher efficiency.
He's doing all this framing anyway, so making backer boxes for the HSU in walls not going to be a problem. It's all going to be hidden behind fabric. He's doing all the framing anyway. All you need is a 1 foot cubic, box. So I'm like, I kind of like the HSU in walls because they're so affordable, and I would just have them everywhere.
And if he did that, then he could just put them everywhere.
Yeah,
that's right.
Kind of like that.
I'm just going to let you know right now, before you hit us up later. bookshelf speakers are what we're going to suggest for the front. Okay,
Well,
the high
big
efficiency high efficiency bookshelf speakers up front will be just fine for this room. So he asked, what about front wides for a full 9.2.6 configuration? Do they need to be towed in at the seats, or can they just be mounted to the side walls without much concern? Now, that's no. Yes, they need to be towed in.
They need to be. Those ones need to be properly aimed and properly positioned.
Those would be speakers that would end up in your room. I don't know that you're going to be able to hide them behind your wall unless you build a something soffit for them to live inside of. I don't know that I would go with front wides. I think now I don't like front wides like, full stop. I don't think that they're. I don't mind people having them, but I have a problem when people are like, they haven't treated their room. They haven't upgraded their speakers. They're using a 5-year-old receiver, and they're asking about whether or not they should get front wides. I'm like, no, do all the other stuff first. But in your case, since you're kind of doing all, I mean, you want this clean. You're going to have this look like a starship or a Star Wars ship, and you want that look. I think that these speakers will end up having to live in the room, or you'll have to make some sort of design. Like everything else is easy to hide behind the walls that you're going to be making. Right. These would not be.
It could potentially fit with the type of design he's going for because the starships have these angles to them. So having that ready to go for front wides, but they definitely need to be at plus minus 60. I will accept nothing else plus minus 60 degrees to the left and right, and they do need to be angled in to face the seats. You can't just willy-nilly put them on the walls. So I'm fine with planning for it, but you know what? If it's too big of a hassle, do not worry if you don't have them. That's the way I would put it.
So since he's considering the 9.2.6, he is looking at Monoprice's HTP1 for his processor. He already owns an Emotiva XPA5 amplifier as well as a BasX A700. He would need a few more amp channels, but that wouldn't have to be expensive. But he also has Emotiva Upgrade for Life deal that would give him 25% off. So there are Emotiva's processors to consider as well. Their new BasX MC1 processor is intriguing since it's so inexpensive. What do we think he should get as far as processor goes?
So I know this is going to sound like a bit of a cop-out answer, but my 100% genuine answer is wait. Because this room has not been built yet. The addition has not been put on your house yet. And with HDMI 2.1 all in flux on all of these, because none of the ones you've mentioned have HDMI 2.1 ready. All of them have promised it. None of them have it yet. So I know it's a bit of a cop-out answer, but wait. Because once we're to that point, the processor you choose is not going to be something that demands the rest of your room be redesigned. You can slot any processor or receiver in there. So, yeah.
And same thing with amps. I mean, I think I would just live with what you have.
Oh, yeah.
To begin with, and then come back and say, all right, now that I've got the speakers installed and built, I've got the subwoofers installed and built, I've got all the fabric on the wall, I've got all the absorption on the walls, I've added some diffusion because it sounded a little weird here and there. I've tested out some. No, I'm not running my full 9.2.6 configuration that I want to end up with, but I've got the wires running, the speakers installed. What processor would be best for me? Because hopefully at that point there will be one.
Yeah, because that can be a last minute decision. Of everything else, that can be a last minute decision.
Yeah. For the seating riser for the back row, he heard us say a while ago that we would not attach it to the subfloor. Why? He's on board with extra bracing inside and filling it with sand, but why wouldn't the seating riser be attached? My thing is because it's a pain to get rid of it.
That's mainly where that answer came from, was somebody who's asking if they should carpet the entire floor and then have the riser on top of the carpet, or if they should build the riser into the room and then carpet over it. And we were like, you're not necessarily staying in this house forever. If you build that riser in and somebody else doesn't want it, that's a huge pain. Whereas if you say, you know what, hey, you can take that riser out and there's carpet under there. That, for resale value. So that's where we're coming from there. If you are 100% certain this is never, ever.
Well, not only that, this is a different situation. Yeah. This is not a room that is being used for a theater. This is a theater. This is a theater room.
And
this is a room that has a design. Yeah. No one's going to walk in here and say, "I wonder what they do in here."
Right.
No one's going to wonder that. So when they that platform, your platform, I have no problems with you bolting it down.
Agreed.
It's when somebody has a room that looks like a normal room, except that it has a big projection screen in it. Then I'm like, don't paint the walls black because it's weird, and don't attach anything to the floor because you want to get rid of it someday. You, on the other hand, this is, somebody's going to walk in here and go, I'm tearing all of this out.
Right.
Or they're going to go, this is the best thing I've ever seen. I'm buying the house because of it. Yeah, the riser will not be the make or break.
Yeah,
which
your
for
riser
other
being
things
attached, we're fine with it. This room.
So what screen should he get? Since he wants something in the 150 to 165 inch range, he's thinking he'll need a screen with some gain, but acoustically transparent screens typically seem to have lower gain. He's looked at Seymour AV. They seem a little pricey, and he isn't sure which model he should get. What about the silver ticket woven screen? So Seymour AV is more expensive, but their weave is very tight, and you won't see it from a distance. Now, you want to sit very close to a very big screen, and that's where I would generally hesitate to say that silver ticket is the way to go, because their screens, which I like and I own, it's right there, and I have no problems with, but theirs are elites. The one of those, the weave is not quite as tight.
The elite one, not quite as tight. Little bit of color shift, and honestly, the weave isn't as tight on the silver ticket either. And their gain is definitely below 1.
Right.
You do need the gain. Be aware, HDR is not going to look HDR no matter what you do. At this screen size, you can get good SDR, and that's where we're going to stay. So if you want acoustically transparent, which I am on board with, because you got the big screen size, I don't want your center on the floor or right up against the ceiling. So I think this is not an area to skimp. All right. You want the good performance. That means you want good acoustically transparent where you don't see the weave, because you got a big screen from about 12 feet away. So you don't have to go for the tightest ultra fine weave, but you want the good weave, and you want a screen that actually hits the type of gain numbers that they claim. And that is Seymour's Center Stage XD. That's what you want. They have their less expensive frame, because yours can be a fixed frame. So they've got their precision frame. Now for the 150 inch size, that's $1,900. That's not cheap, but it's not the most expensive screen we've ever seen. Far from it.
No, it's not. And that used to be cheap for a screen.
Exactly.
Full stop.
Yeah. And
especially
that's
a
really good one. That's a really, really good one at that size. So honestly, I think I would just stop there. You could look at Illusion Vision's reference audio weave. It's along similar caliber, but more difficult and more expensive in the States. So I would get the Seymour AV Center Stage XD all day long. It's worth it. You're saying, where can you save money? Where should you spend the money? This is a place to spend the money.
Yeah. We will help you save money too, but in this case, it's not a good place to do it. So he's always wanted a JVC projector, but the brand new laser models are expensive. Yeah, you see, you've got bigger problems than that, because we're talking about trying to get 150 to like 150 inch screen out of a consumer level product, and they, and I don't engage. I say all the time online, when I answer people's questions, I'm like, if you're going to go bigger than the 135, you're not getting HDR. Yeah. And consumer level projectors are just not built to get a really bright image above 135 inches. And the problem is, people are like, well, if you look at the specs, it says blah, 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 and HDR is this. I'm like, yeah, that's when it's in vivid light gun, all the fans are blowing constantly, inaccurate mode, color shifted. They can get that bright. But once you calibrate it, you're going to see half or less than half of those lumens hitting that screen. So you may want to skimp here as well, but I'm going to tell you, this is probably not the place to skimp anyway. Anyways, he asks if they're worth it, the JVCs, or should he save some money and go with the older NX5? Given the screen size, what should he be considering? And do we have a recommended retailer for JVC's projectors? Again, this is a decision to make much, much later.
Yes and no, because once you're saying where the mount is going to be and wiring and all that, you got to have some idea of at least what the throw ratio is going to be. So it can't be a completely last minute decision.
Let's be honest. He's going to it's either going to be inside of a box at the very back of the room, or he's going to have it hanging down from the ceiling.
Yeah, he's going to have it.
And if he's going to do it hanging down from the ceiling, which he's probably going to do because the room was 29 feet long, he could have it hanging down anywhere. And you don't. And since he's going to have panels everywhere in this place, he's going to be on the ceiling too, right? It's got to be. He's got to have them on the ceiling. I was
thinking that. Just given the budget that you stated, I don't see how you're going to have $10,000 plus for a projector. Yeah. If you're going to go way over the budget, okay, but I just don't see how you're going to have it. The other thing is, as ironically, the NX5 or the new NP5, because the MP5 is the model that's replacing the NX5 for $1,000 more, but the NP5 has 4K 120 and the NX5 is stuck at 4K 60. So if you're worried about 4K 120 support, you might want to look at the NP5. But even though their lumen spec is like 100 lumens less than the NZ8 or the NZ9, you have to remember that there is a color filter that goes in place for the full DCI P3 color on those higher, more expensive models, and that reduces the light output by at least 25%, if not more. So the honest answer is the NX5 or the NP5 in sheer lumen output has a bit of an advantage because they don't have that DCI P3 color filter that's cutting your light output by at least 25%. I think price-wise and lumen output-wise, it is better to look at either the NX5 or the NP5. And I'm quite happy to leave you with that. I would go to AV Science. I would talk to the guys at AV Science because they cut deals on JVC projectors and nobody else does. So I would talk to them.
Yeah, and I would still say you can plan for that and think about that and then still wait a little bit, especially if you can do a lot of this. If you're comfortable doing a lot of this stuff yourself, you can run the power. The only thing you have to really worry about is running power back to your
electrical, where you've got your battery backup.
Your battery backup is, which you can have it if you can install that, then have the Romex run essentially to your ceiling with a big spool of it. And when you find out where you're going to put your projector on the ceiling, you put it there, you cut a hole out, you pop down the box, and Bob's your uncle, you're done. So I would still wait on this, but I have no problems with your plan being one of these JVC projectors. So he asked what ceiling mount for a JVC projector, Rob?
The Peerless mount with the JVC mounting plate, so you can get those at B&H Photo for $120.
Yeah. Yes, would it be worth getting a dedicated Ultra HD Blu-ray player or a Panasonic, a Panasonic, or would his Xbox Series X be fine for that? I mean, you don't have Dolby Vision, so
nope.
You don't have to worry about that because the Xbox Series X does not do
And if you get the JVC, you've got JVC's frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping. So honestly, your Series X is fine.
Probably going to be fine there. Yeah. I don't use mine for that. What diameter of conduit should he run for cables? And if he has conduit, does it matter if the cables themselves are in-wall rated? What about an extension cord for the projector? Can that be run inside conduit? No. We've discussed this.
Yeah,
no.
The extension, the power cable extension cannot go inside conduit. That is not okay. We'll link you to the AV Gadgets article that shows you the proper way to do it. We've had Mario, our resident electrician who writes us in all the time. He sent a diagram for how to do that properly. So that on the electrical power side, the extension cord got the link for how to do that properly. The conduit, I mean, essentially the biggest diameter you can, one that will fit an HDMI plug if you can. Right. So I mean, inch and a half is great if you can run 1.5 inch diameter for the HDMI cable.
I mean, if you have fabric all over the frickin' walls anyways, and the ceiling, you don't need to.
You don't really need to do it. You don't really need to do it. And
now for the power, you still have to go that. You still have to do that.
Yes.
But for everything else, you could just just run it behind the lattice work.
Monoprice has certified fiber optic ultra high speed HDMI cables. That is absolutely what I would get. You want certified ultra high speed, and the fiber optic will have the link that you need. And they also have very inexpensive 12 gauge in wall rated speaker wire. That is totally fine for that.
So he asked, should he do a fiber optic ceiling? He always thought that would be cool. You were wrong. You're wrong about that, and I'm sorry to say that.
And the Star Destroyers don't have stars inside.
They do not. What about floor lighting, like what theaters have so you can see the steps, or wall sconces? How many would he need? I wouldn't do any of that. Did you see the pictures that Rob have? They have like one panel floor to ceiling has like a lattice work and then lights behind it. That's what I would do.
Yeah.
I would do that. I would have some of the panels on your wall just be lights floor to ceiling, LEDs back there.
And then you can have the dim. Similar on the ceiling. They've got graded lights. I would do that. It would look just like a starship.
That's what I would do.
Yep.
Do not, under any circumstances, do a fiber optic ceiling. Okay, just don't do it. He found a tutorial on YouTube for a DIY air pressure powered door. It even makes the cool whoosh sound when it opens and closes, but it seems a bit complicated and to set up and put together. Are there any off-the-shelf automatic doors that would provide the same effect and sound? I'll be honest with you. If I were going to do this, which I would not do, but if I was going to do this, I wouldn't try to get a door that made that sound. I would try to get a door that automatically opened and closed, which, you know,
and then just attach a little speaker to it.
And then attach a little speaker to it that has a trigger that every time the door opens, it goes, whoosh, it makes the sound. That's what I would do, because I think it's insane to try to find the door that makes this. That's
I'm not worried about the sound that we're gonna do with a speaker if we do this. I don't have like a automatic door to point you to. I don't know. They sound expensive to me.
They do.
Honestly, the DIY project that this guy did, I'm like, that is very doable, because I mean it's all just air pumps. So I think if you followed,
no, it's an audio. Sorry, you linked up a video.
I did.
Sorry.
Yes. Yeah. In any case, I think if you followed exactly what he does in there, I think that's very doable. So yeah, I'm kind of keen at that. I don't have an off the shelf to point you to.
I would be more worried about the doors rattling, you know, and because I mean
the one that he built, it's pretty solid. It's all.
I'm not saying I haven't seen the video, obviously.
Yeah, it's
but
on pneumatics and it's all air
about.
Pressure, and like it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Yeah. So I guess that'd be the only thing I would worry about. If it were me, I'd just build a regular old door, and then when I opened it, it would have the trigger and it would have the sound. You know, whoosh, whatever. All right, so that's it for this.
That's finally
monstrosity of a question. Yes. All right.
We'll try to.
Monty appreciated our answers when he double checked the advice that Git provided to him for his theater, with open shelves full of Legos on the back. Yeah, I remember this. Yeah. Okay.
That's just a reminder.
Legos. You should get together with Sean here and talk about stuff. Just to clarify a few things, we made lots of suggestions for DIY, particularly the corner base traps and the entire back wall. That sounds reasonable. So where's the best place to get the materials, installation of the fabric, and treating the entire back wall? Can we point to a DIY example so he knows exactly what to build? Well, we have people here who have done this, and
I'm just going to show you a picture of like what Brad did in his converted garage. We're literally just talking about 2x4 or even 1x4, because this does not need to be strong. But just regular 2x4 framing, 24 inches on center, just a base plate at the bottom, a top plate at the top, and some studs that go up and down. And in your case, since it's all going to be covered by your shelf full of Lego, it doesn't need to look super pretty. Just staple some acoustically transparent fabric to that, and you're done. As far, there's insulation inside of that stick framing. So super simple to construct, super inexpensive. We can point you to Acoustimac, their entire DIY section. You could get the insulation and the fabric right from there if you want to, or you could get the speaker grill cloth from Parts Express that we mentioned in the last question, and get the insulation at a hardware store, because any insulation will do. Get the cheapest insulation that you
just don't want it to have a backing on it, unless you put that backing towards the wall.
Yeah,
but I wouldn't do that. You can also look. Just Google search your area for like Owens Corning or
Roxel
or any of that stuff. Like there is a plant near here that I drive by all the time on I-4 that is Owens Corning. I don't know what they make over there, but I'm pretty sure if I called them and said, "Can I buy some insulation from you?" And I've done that before when I lived up in Jacksonville. There was a company and they were an insulation supplier for like the entire area, and I just drove up to their loading docks and they had a box waiting for me, and I gave the guy $80 or $90 or whatever it was, and I walked away. So you can sometimes save some money doing it that way. Or, like Rob said, you can order from one of the places. We said to go with the Ascend Duo LCR for a center speaker, as the form factor makes the most sense to go below his TV. We said it would match well with his existing Ascend Sierra 2 bookshelf speakers, but would there be any benefit to getting 3 of the Duo LCR speakers so that all front 3 speakers are literally identical? Rob's going to maybe say yes. I'm going to definitely say no.
In this case, I'm going to say no as well. He seems to be itching to spend money that he said he wanted to save. I'm like, dude, you could save money here. You've got speakers that are going to match great already. If you just want to for looks, your money, you could spend it, but he was saying he'd prefer to save the money. You can absolutely save the money here, dude. Just stick with your Sierra 2s as your front, left, right, get the Duo for the center.
So, people talk about this all the time, about how important it is that all 3 speakers be exactly the same. But what they won't tell you is that if you actually listen, if you sat in your seat and played each speaker individually, they would not sound identical because of the placement differences. One's near a wall, one's more out in the room because it's
lower.
Another right in the center is lower, and in the cabinet. They're not going to sound identical, but they're going to sound more alike than dissimilar when you're in the midst of watching a movie and there's a pan or something like that. Mismatches are not like, I think they're a little bit different. They are obvious. When your center channel does not sound like the rest of your speakers, it happens immediately. You're not like, why is it? It happens immediately.
And it's much different than Sierra 2s versus Duos, which use identical drivers. They just have slightly different cabinets to give you different form factors. No, these are super similar.
Yeah, so just for fun, we've said the phrase "destroy the room" a few times when we talk about subwoofers. What does this actually mean? Are people going to get injured? Obviously not. People don't get injured. Obviously we're talking about just how much bass it can put.
Actually, you could cause hearing damage with enough sound pressure, so that
is true. You could rupture eardrums and that sort of things, but we're talking about just in general how easily those subs could. So when I say, those subs are going to destroy the room, what I mean is you're not going to have to turn them up very loud to fill the space with bass.
You've got tons of headroom. Is basically
tons of headroom. Right. That's what we mean by that. If you did turn them all the way up, could you cause structural damage to your house? I would say probably not.
Probably not that, but what we're saying is you could get in excess of 115 decibels. If you can get in excess of 115 decibels, we're into destroy the room territory. We've gone beyond the maximum limit of reference volume in the bass.
Yeah. John asks, what do we think about the $250 ears measurement rig from miniDSP? If he wants to experiment with EQ in his planar magnetic headphones, do we think it'd be a worthwhile investment? I'm looking at it.
So this is basically a couple of UMic 1 capsules inside some silicone molded ears on a headphone stand. That's what it is. So it's giving you the, approximation of an average pinna of an ear, the outer ear, with the UMic 1 capsules inside it, which we know the UMic 1 capsules are very, very accurate, given that their price point. So could that be a useful tool? It could absolutely be a useful tool if you want, a rig that's going to be able to take measurements of headphones and give you something to compare to. It could be useful. What I would say is your pinna is not going to be the same as the pinna of these, so I would not go strictly by measurements. I wouldn't do all the EQ on the ears headphone rig and then listen to the headphones and go, I don't really like the sound, and go, but the measurements look good, so I can't trust my own ears. But in terms of comparing the measurements to each other, I think this could be a useful rig. Absolutely.
It seems overkill for a home user. I'm gonna be honest with you. It seems like more than I would want to spend just to EQ. I feel like for $250, you could easily spend less and have somebody do this
mold
for
your
you.
Head.
Well, I mean, not necessarily mold your head, but just do this for you. Like you just find a local calibrator and call them and say, dude, you calibrate headphones?
Know. I mean, it depends on how many you're doing. But I mean, it's two UMic 1s plus the
literally said
so.
EQing his planar magnetic headphones. He's doing one. That is
what
I don't
know.
Doing.
John's into headphones. He might have more than one going on.
All right. How long's this question? Because I am starving.
Oh, okay. I think we can do this one.
Mike bought his first projector. It's the Hisense L9G ultra short throw model that comes with an ambient light rejecting screen. He got the 120-inch version on sale for $5,000. Apparently, it has a gray screen. He has two windows directly behind his projection screen, but the window bays are stuffed with 2-inch thick rigid insulation and covered with a fabric frame. He's sitting 11 feet from eyes to screen, and he loves the field of view. Fantastic. Mm-hmm. As we can see from the photos, the room is all white and not completely light controlled. The included screen is gray, and they say it has a 0.4 gain with the ceiling light rejection. He mostly uses that at night, and with all the lights out and the projector turned off, he can't tell the difference between the section itself and the black border, so it's pretty darn close to pitch black. But as soon as he turns the projector on, black is clearly no longer black. Contrast within a scene is fine, but any movies with black bars are very noticeable, and he's just disappointed with the overall lack overall black level performance. So yeah, he put the projector in filmmaker mode and lowered the laser light net level as low as it will go, but any images that are supposed to have a totally black background still appear with an obvious glow. So Hisense offers 100 days for you to try their products at home. You can easily exchange or return within that window. With their new PX1 Pro UST model, ultra short throw model, be a big improvement. The LG9 and this 120-inch screen are a combo package, so we also have to return the screen, and the PX1 Pro does not come with the screen. So is there a different ambient light rejecting screen that we would pair with the PX1 Pro to produce a much better black levels in the setup? He really doesn't want to spend much more than $5,000, so any alternative suggestions are welcome. I don't think you're going to like what I'm going to say. I'm going to be honest with you. I think you absolutely need to return this thing and buy yourself a OLED.
And you can get the 83-inch OLED for $5,000. You put it on the TV stand a foot and a half closer. It's not exactly the same field of view, but if you want black levels, that is the way. The PX1 Pro is not an improvement on the which one was it? LP9, LS9, whatever the thing is, L9G. I got it all wrong. There was a 9 in there and an L, but it's not a big improvement. That is not the way that you're going to get what you're looking for. And it's not the ambient light rejecting that's the issue. It's that these are all DLP projectors. They don't produce pure black. They just don't.
Yeah. So I would love to say that there is, I didn't know if you stopped talking.
Yeah,
or
sorry.
If it was, because Skype has been glitching on me.
A little bit, yes.
But you hear people talk about the great black levels of a projector, like full stop, and you assume that means that it is a performance that black is actually black. It's rarely the case with the projector.
Have actual, the JVCs, the black is not actually black.
And we've actually had people on this podcast say, I bought this JVC projector and it's still a little gray in the black areas, and we're like, yeah, it's a projector, my dude. That's what they look like. So if you're looking for actually black, the only way you're going to get that is through a flat panel, specifically an OLED. That's the only way you're going to get it. And I know that's not what you want to hear, and that's why I said you weren't going to like my answer, but there is, like, saying a projector has great black levels is comparing it to other projectors.
It's all very, very relative.
It's not comparing it to OLEDs. It's not comparing it to turning the lights off and closing your eyes. It is comparing it to other projectors. Yeah. And compared to other projectors, the JVCs have fantastic black levels.
Right.
But it's still not black.
It is still not black.
It's just very, very dark gray. Okay?
Yeah, the black bars are not pure black on a JVC, and then these are a step well below that in terms of what... I mean, this is one of the reasons why it's so difficult for me, because the ultra short throw projectors, there are people who are like, I just want the size. Can I use it during the day? Is it going to still look good at night? And I'm just like... For me, the answer is no. And then some people come back and go, you're nuts. I bought one of these and I love it. And then other people are like, I bought it and it's not anywhere close to black, and the contrast isn't anywhere close to as high as my flat panel used to be. The size is great, and none of us are going to object to the size. We all are on point with that. But it sounds like you're closer to my feeling on it, which is, man, but black is not black. During the day, it is not like a flat panel. It's like, for a projector, it's good.
Yes.
But compared to,
a flat panel,
you're hoping for, it's not.
Yeah.
You've already got a TV stand, so you're not objection to having a TV stand at the front of your room. There's already one there. TV stand
forward a little bit.
83-inch OLED on the top of that thing, as far forward as you can bring it. That's the solution. It's not going to be exactly the same field of view, but an 83-inch OLED from a foot and a half closer, it's going to be pretty darn nice. And when you say you want black levels, you're going to have your black levels now.
Yeah. Okay, John will be the last one. Okay. John bought the Peerless projector mount with a JVC-specific mounting plate for his NX7 projector. He read those instructions carefully, and the notch in the mounting plate is supposed to be at the front closest to the lens, as is the arrow on the round ceiling mount that he has the worm gears on it.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever.
In his image, he's got both of the things. They're actually at the bottom of the image, but the notch and the arrow are on the same side. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is off-center. Should he be concerned about that? Do the JVC projectors have more weight on one side? Why would the mounting plate be designed this way? JVC projectors do not have the lens in the center, do they?
They have the lens in the center. They do have the lens in the center. They do not have the lamp and the power supply in the center.
Yeah, that would explain it.
The lamp and the power supply are... Okay, so look, if you're facing the back of the projector, the lamp is on the right-hand side. If you're facing the front of the projector, the lamp is on the left-hand side. Precisely the side that the mount is offset to. So it is there to be over the center of gravity of the subwoofer, not the geometric center of the subwoofer projector. It's not there to be over the geometric center of the projector. It's there to be over the geometric center. It's over the center of gravity. Getting all fumbled up in my words, trying to talk too fast. But that's what's going on there. It's to counteract where the weight of the lamp and the power supply are inside the projector. So you're fine. Although I will admit it's could have thrown for a little bit because you're like, oh man, I lined up where my mount is to be perfectly centered,
right.
And now it shifted it over just a few inches. Now you have the lens shift on the projector. It really should not be a problem. You can use the horizontal lens shift to bring you back, but I can see how that might have been a bit of a bummer because you're like, oh man, I thought it was all going to look perfectly centered, and now the mount itself is slightly off center.
All right, who do we have left?
Okay, let's see. What do we have? 8 questions left on the list. My goodness. Bob and Jason, Alan, and Infinite Gary, of course. John in the Philippines. Greg. Was Greg's the long question? Yeah, Greg's was the other long question. Multi-part as I'm scrolling down to go past all of that. And let's see, did I miss one? I missed one here. David and Aras. There we go. Okay, I think I got everybody. Already a full list for next week.
Yeah. Well, it is what it is. It's fine.
It is what it is.
Blame Skype because Skype messed up my audio and it took us.
You ended up with a shorter episode this week, and I screwed everything up this week. We're recording on a much later day than we used to, and so everything's a bit of a mess. We'll catch up at some point. We always do.
Don't worry. We'll get you your questions. So if you want to add to the list, email us at question@avrant.com and we'll answer your AV and home theater question.
For sure.
Yeah, thanks our listeners of the leak. I guess I should make some Vichy Soir. We want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank Gregory and Jonathan for going to avrant.com and clicking the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link and giving us a PayPal donation, as well as our 135 patrons over at patreon.com.
For sure. Gregory, Jonathan, thank you for the PayPal donations. Really appreciate the financial support. And patreon.com/AVRant Podcast. If you would like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation, support us financially that way. Thanks so much to our 135 patrons over there.
I want to thank Kurt for pointing out the error over at AV Gadgets, Alex for sending me some photos to use on AV Gadgets, and notes of gratitude from Daryl, Sean, Gurinder, John, Mike, Jason, Alan, Jay, Greg, and Aras.
Yes, indeed. Kurt and Alex, thank you for supporting the podcast, or supporting AV Gadgets anyway. It's tangential. It definitely counts because Tom is the editor-in-chief over there, and Andrew is helping him out. They're what? Are you guys a two-man team? Does Clint actually write?
We are a
Clint
two-man
sort of
team.
has some articles that go
Clint
up there.
Clint does not. Those articles are very old.
Okay, reposts.
Those articles are not good. Those are just reposts from many years ago.
And then, yes, thank you to Daryl, Sean, Gurinder, John, Mike, Jason, Alan, Jay, Greg, and Aras for sending us notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going. We definitely appreciate the notes of encouragement. A big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
That's right. For AV Rant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AV Rant.
Now go out and listen to something.